and I would like to welcome everyone to Be Wise. Being wise just means being well, being informed, being safe, and being empowered. It's really key for us to understand how much power we do have within us to deal with anything that comes on our plate. Short of it taking us out, we have the opportunity to do more and do better and be kind with each other and connect. And that's what everyone that you see on our panel today is doing. They're being so kind and generous in their time that they're offering us today to talk about clarity. Let's get us some. We need some clarity here, not just on COVID-19, but just in life in general. It's not COVID-19 that makes clarity important. Clarity is something important for us to strive for in general. And when we have opportunity to connect with such fantastic people who will introduce themselves in a few moments, it's a gem, it's a treasure, and I appreciate you guys all for being here. Audience members, I just want you to know that we have a poll, a live poll that's available for you to participate in. Please feel free to fill those out. Just click, 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 and we'll get a great idea as to what it is that you need and want in future Be Wise. Also, if you have any questions, just throw them in the Q&A for us. If you do throw something into the chat, be mindful of to whom that message is going. If you want everybody to see it, feel free, throw it in the chat. If you want it to be private, please mark it directly to the person, whether it's a panelist or myself. Now that I got all of that out of the way, I'd like to start introducing our panelists. So we'll start with Tony. Can you tell us a bit about you?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Tony Babcock. I'm a life coach and mindset coach, and I also teach improv and acting. I am very much aligned with the sentiment of you are enough. I live my life through that mentality, and just super pumped to be here. Kata, so glad you invited me in, and excited to share this space.
Thank you so much, Tony. Appreciate you being here and having you here. And Victoria, now on to you.
Hello. Hi. I'm Victoria, and I'm an actor, a comedian, a series writer, a producer, and also an improviser and an improv coach. And I actually work with Tony at IYA, Improv Your Acting, and also just working to help make all of us more present and more connected every day. Thank you so much, Kata, and everyone for having us here today.
My pleasure. The fact that you guys talk about, being enough and improv, I find it's really key because a lot of times we are not given that message that we are enough. And it's tough to be clear on life when we always feel like we are striving to reach some kind of level that we have no idea where that measurement came from. And that brings me over to Steffi because realizing that and getting that kind of clarity has to do with how kind we are to ourselves. The ability to go easy on ourselves is really key to understanding that we are enough. And Steffi, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Kata, you introduced me so beautifully. Thank you. Clarity is key for living a good life. And as a life and career coach and kindness advocate, I work with individuals in transitions and going into companies speaking about why a caring and connected culture matters. And when I coach leaders, we talk about being kinder to themselves, and then they can be kinder to other people. And when we're kinder, we feel better. Hence my tagline, be kinder, be better, because it matters. And as we've learned during this time, we're all connected, aren't we?
Absolutely. That connection really, sometimes we forget. We feel alone. We feel like nobody can get it and nobody can be going through what we're going through. And especially if we don't have the space or the ability to connect with other people who can help us, it can be very lonely. Even in a house full of people. Speaking of which, Day, would you like to take the floor? You're in a house full of lots of people, little people. Our parent advocate.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm the parent advocate. And if there's anything I would want to remind everyone who is watching, anyone out there, is that a lot of us are parents, including the people that we're turning to during this whole COVID-19. So we have to be mindful that when the way we treat each other and the way we treat our community and the way that we treat our first responders and the way that we treat our doctors, just remember that everyone has their own family, their own home situation to deal with, and hopefully that we can all uplift each other to help to get through this. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Day. I mean, paying attention to the people who are providing services and providing care and support is such a key point. I mean, we're really highly sensitive to it now with COVID-19. I would love for us to come out of this understanding and appreciating and remembering that still. I'd like to introduce, I'm going to come to our two psychotherapists that we have on board, starting first with Candace, because she's returning. She's becoming a serial panelist like Steffi here. But, but speaking to the fact of, recognizing what's needed as a professional out there, as a psychotherapist yourself, and also to speaking to the mental wellness that's necessary for people who are listening in and who are out there wondering, how do I do this? How do I get where I need to be to feel some peace and balance?
Right. Thank you. Yes. Thanks, Kata. I think you raised such a good point in that, right now we're in this space of thinking about sort of going back to normal. And I think for a lot of people that raises a new kind of anxiety. And so definitely in the work that I'm doing, we're having a lot of discussions around, the good and the bad, and really just taking a moment before we go back to the hustle and the bustle and the busy. Not that for a lot of us this isn't busy too, but looking at what do we value from this experience and what do we value from life before, because we cannot be what we were. Every experience changes us, and so what we can do is grow into a new space, in a new way of doing things, but taking value from this time during COVID and being home and recognizing maybe that I need a bit of space from my family. I love them, but I need some space. But also recognizing that I kind of like having family dinners, so finding the good and the bad and comparing it and starting to build up, how do we want to move forward? That's really a big piece of that clarity and that mental wellness. And it helps to take out the anxiety of returning to normal, because we start to have a good sense of what it is that we want the new normal to be.
Yeah, the new normal. I mean, the balance that you talk about and creating a new normal, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of clarity in order to get clarity. Isn't that really ironic? You need clarity to get the clarity. But I mean, having a balanced emotional state, tools available to us to manage the flux of emotions is something that is very important. And Marcelane, I know you speak on that. Self-regulation. Can you talk a bit about what you're going to bring to the table? Yeah.
So today I'm going to be talking about a term that I use a lot, and it's called resetting. Right? I really have an interest in how we manage our emotions and how we self-regulate. And particularly now when we're at home and, we're not out and about, we really need to reset how we look at things. We need to, now we're home, take a look at, okay, what do I do now? What do I need to do to sort of cope with some of those anxieties? How can I rethink some of what's happening to me right now? So later on, I'll be talking a little more about that and how we can bring pieces of our culture and of ourselves into that process. That makes any sense?
It totally does. And I love that piece. I love everything that you guys are bringing to this table. This is going to be so juicy. Okay, so this last piece here, when it comes to everybody that is on this panel, and a good number of our audience members, I suspect, everyone's got either business or work. That's also part of the table. It's not only our life clarity, but also our business clarity, which is predicated on our life clarity. They're so aligned. And the old paradigm of business allowed for a huge discrepancy between business and how we are. But what we're moving into, there's a lot less tolerance. And I really welcome Heather to the table to talk about what you do, because your branding, she's a branding consultant. So biased with you guys, but branding consultant and coach, business coach. So if you'd share a bit about what you do, Heather.
Hi, my name's Heather, and thank you, Kata. You're so sweet. My business is called Authentically, and I also have a second business called My Life Planner that I'm a partner in. And I just want to challenge businesses to be 100% themselves. I think that people come back to us and are loyal to us because we show a little bit of our humanity. And so, you know, my mom used to go out and she would shop, and for $100, she'd come back with a ridiculous amount of beautiful things. Like, she just had an eye for deals. And she told me that if you were to buy everything that you loved, it would just match. You know, so if we were to be true to ourselves, the way that we spoke, the way that we wrote, the way that we presented ourselves, we could really come off as our genuine selves and attract more loyal customers that will continue to buy from us and invest in what we say, because, you know, that baloney detector doesn't go off.
Baloney detector. Let's start there, shall we? Okay. So, I mean, the way that we've been socialized, it's very interesting. It started from way back. We're talking about rewriting records that have been built throughout our entire lives. And the records are, you don't do that. Your face should not look like that. Smile. Don't do this. Do it like this. I don't think that's very good. There's a lot of messaging that we receive as we grow up from people who are our primary caregivers, people that we look up to, right? You're teaching me how to be in this world. And if we get taught that how we are is not right, we don't know any better until maybe a little later on, if we're blessed enough to come upon that type of reflection, to know, no, you are enough. Using Tony's words. These words are very, very key. Where I would like to start is with Steffi, and speaking about that kindness and self-compassion. Whatever you'd like to speak on concerning clarity in the area of self.
Well, Kata, so many interesting panelists here today who have so much to say. I was just enjoying listening to their wisdom. I would say clarity begins with know thyself. We've all heard that term before. And if we can know ourselves, we can be compassionate to the way we are. We don't have to march to anyone else's drummer. As Heather touched upon, being authentically yourself is so important. In this time of isolation, we've had to sit in some painful things. We don't get to run away from it. We're here. As John Kabat-Zinn, the famous meditation teacher, writes, wherever you go, there you are. So clarity comes, in my opinion, from knowing yourself and taking the time to be self-compassionate as we move through these emotions, and then understanding that maybe your clarity comes from you want to be in a new career. Maybe you want to take one thing out of this time. I've talked about that, just one thing that you've maintained well and that has worked well for you. So if you can find something that works well, that's been good, and you can take that and take it out into, what do we call it, the new normal again, but going back to the world. You don't have to be the same person if you've become more in touch with yourself and it doesn't feel the same, and you want to remove toxic relationships or toxic habits. Whatever feels right, it's one small step at a time. I know I've gotten deeper into meditation at this time, so I want to keep my habit up of getting up early and doing mindfulness, because that just gives me peace of mind. And when we have peace of mind, we hear our creative intelligence, not the voices of other people around us. So I would advise, for clarity at this time and moving ahead, what's the one thing that gives you peace of mind, that is kind to yourself? And then you can bring that outwards from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Steffi.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And remember, you can throw your questions into the Q&A section in the chat if you have comments or any feedback or reflections from what you hear, about what you hear from the panelists. Please feel free to throw that in. You mentioned, Steffi, peace of mind. So key. In the midst of turmoil, in the midst of maybe that toxic, relationship, if home is not a safe space, or even if it's just a tense space because people cannot get away. I'd really appreciate, Marcelane, if you just speak on what are some tools in order to find some calm, to get towards that peace that Steffi's talking about a bit, in order to plan.
Okay, so Steffi talked about mindfulness, and I think that's a great tool to use to try to bring some calm to oneself. But I also believe that there are other aspects of us culturally that we can also use to bring our bodies back to balance or homeostasis, right? And that's going to briefly talk about resetting, which is something I learned from my son. So about 8 years ago, he was being bullied by a teacher, and he was just disappearing in the bathroom. I think he's about 9 or 10 at the time. And so I said to him, "What are you doing in the washroom?" So he said, "Mom, I'm resetting myself. I'm resetting my body." I said, "Well, what does that mean exactly?" And he said, "Well, when I go into the washroom, I first wash my face." So he's grounding himself. So we can do sensory things that can help our bodies to go back to balance, right? Then he said he would visualize a time where he would feel better about himself. And then when he got that visual, right, so he's rethinking what and that thought process affects how he feels. And then he would regroup. He would go back into the situation and adapt, right? So now you're talking about, Kata, about somebody being in a space where they might not feel so safe. What do we do in those kind of circumstances? Well, I guess the first thing I want to take a look at is, if it's not safe, my first question would be, should you really be there if it's really not that safe? But if they have to tolerate it, so say, for example, a woman was probably going through something with her husband, and they're going through a divorce, but they can't leave right now, particularly with COVID. We can't just go out and leave. What can she do, right? So I guess what she could take a look at is, how do I, depending on her emotions, if it's too intense, she might want to participate in some type of activity that's going to distract her, right? So as part of resetting, we want to look at distraction. How do I stay away from this person? Do I go, read or something, or do I, turn to religion and spirituality? Nowadays, people, and as a therapist, I find, sometimes we're afraid of using the word God. Don't ask me why, right? But for some people, when we think about God, that can bring us some peace and calm, right? And I think too, because religion has this kind of negative connotation to it, people often shy away from that. But that's another way that we can use to regulate, right? Or if you're spiritual versus religious, either way, those practices are pretty helpful. You can also use things like, there's research out there that shows how people use rosaries to self-regulate, right? So whatever it is that people use, drumming is another way to get your emotions under control. But I just wanted to talk briefly about emotion regulation, because I think ideally what we want to look at is, there are different ways that we have available to us, and knowing when to use what. So looking at things in a different way is one way. So the reappraisal piece, distraction, acceptance. We're in a time now where we don't have a lot of control. What is it that we can accept, right? And what is it that we do have control over? Usually in times when our emotions are too intense, right, you might want to use distraction instead of reappraisal. Because sometimes people are like, I go to a therapist and they tell me to use CBT and it's not working. Well, it's not going to work all the time. And having these kind of methods, different methods available to us, right, that will help us to regulate. I think that would be important for many people. Can't hear you, sorry. Uh-oh.
I didn't want to interrupt you with my noise, and then I subsequently,
Yes.
kept myself muted. I wanted to take what you're talking about with regards to resetting and extrapolate, expand from that, because all of your points are so key. I mean, for people who cannot leave a situation for whatever reason. I mean, in 27 years with Toronto Police, I can tell you there were quite a number of times when I would see people in situations that they were unable to leave, and the reasons were just so many. So many reasons. So being able to find that space inside in the midst of an area where you feel you can't leave. I'm sure your son didn't think he could just walk out of school. So he found a space.
Right.
He found that washroom. He found a practice that would bring him some sort of resetting and feeling of safety. I want to actually, like I said, just expand on that point when it comes to self-regulating, mental wellness, and move on to Candace. Thank you very much. When it comes to not only self-regulation and resetting, but the ability to understand what is necessary in the moment just for that moment. The feeling of safety, the feeling of self-care, the feeling of balance. Would you speak to that a bit, Candace?
Yeah, I think when we work with clients who are anxious or depressed or just generally, for whatever reason, their body is, I would say, off kilter, right? What we think about is there are different levels of intervention that you can give yourself. So we have we have the more kind of biological interventions where you regulate your breathing, where you calm your fight or flight system down, where you literally are just dealing with the physical symptoms. And then we have things like distraction, which is great. It'll take you out of it for a little while. And the key with a distraction strategy is that it simply takes you away for as long as you're doing that activity. But when you stop doing that activity, you will then be returning to that state of thinking about whatever it is that's got you upset, or dealing with those issues. And then the last category would be reduction strategies. And reduction strategies include things like CBT, planning, the more in-depth self-awareness, self-understanding, and processing kind of strategies. And what I often say to people is that how you decide which one you use really depends on the situation that you're in, because you need all of those strategies. You need to be able to just calm myself down right now and get on with what I have to do. I need to be able to distract myself for a little bit and then go back to dealing with whatever, stress I'm living in. And ultimately, yes, I do need to learn those CBT, self-awareness, self-understanding kind of pieces too, because that's the piece that ultimately allows me to process and move forward. And I'm mindful of some of the pieces you started this with, talking about all of the messaging that we bring with us into our life from our caregivers. And I would say none of those caregivers typically are not trying to mess us up. It's just how our child's mind interprets and understands the messaging in the same way that their understanding comes through and can twist some of those messages. Those pieces become what we know as core beliefs. They are the underlying structure with which we understand our place in the world. And so those reduction strategies, the journaling, which to me is probably one of my favorite pieces, is understanding. So journaling is the process of getting everything out of your head. When it's in your head, it's big and loud and there's nowhere for it to go, and it just gets bigger. But as soon as you start to journal and you write it out and you get it out, you become more aware of the subconscious, unconscious, and core belief layers of what's going on for you. And once you understand yourself, once you understand who you are and what messages you're carrying with you about your place in the world and how the world should work, then you have a choice to challenge it, to change it, or to just decide, you know what, that's me and I'm going to run with it, which is absolutely okay. Because from the knowing, having a choice puts you in control of your life and your situation. Acceptance comes from understanding and recognizing what the boundaries are that you're working within. So the mental wellness piece, the clarity, the self-regulation, these are all pieces of a bigger space. We self-regulate so that we can cope, so that we can think through, we can process, we can deal with stuff. And the more you can do that deeper work, the more you're able to be self-aware enough to move forward in whatever way you choose.
Beautifully said. You guys are just dropping so many gems, and I hope audience members that you have pen and paper. Really, I need to put that into some of the branding there. Don't forget your pen and paper. But we will be routinely sending all of this stuff out. A lot of this, the information that you hear here, and in this space, you'll be receiving as a person who's attended these webinars. So don't worry, never fear. Remember to keep those polls going if you've not filled them in. And Q&A is still open to you guys. But meanwhile, I'm going to keep the questions going just based on what's coming to my mind and what people have asked who are too shy to actually come and ask for themselves. You spoke about acceptance, understanding, and boundaries. And I find, Candace, I find that when it comes to the work that you were teaching, for instance, Victoria, in improv class, that you worked really hard to like slaughter the boundaries, and you were just into the whole, accept what's in the moment right now. And I find that that work is very relevant to seeking and finding clarity. Would you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, I actually want to talk a little bit about clarity in communication and specificity. I mean, what I do as a performer or as an improv coach or coaching actors is trying to forge communication and forge relationships between people who may not have been relating or talking on a similar level. And one of the most important tools that I try to give my actors and comedians is the tool of specificity, being clear and specific, whether it's with their intentions in a scene or just their intentions in real life. It's actually the key to comedy. So take that little note and put it in your next stand-up bit, which I know all of you ladies here and gents are doing. Knowing knowing who you are and knowing how to be specific, it just builds the foundation for me as a comedian and builds the foundation of any relationship. The more specific we are with our wants as creators or as individuals, the easier it is for our audiences and our partners who we're having conversations with to actually relate to us and empathize with us. So if I take it from my point of view and where I'm coming from as a comedian, once my audience is able to really empathize and live through their firsthand experiences with what I'm going through, what I've specifically laid out for them through an improv or through what I'm creating, then we're really able to set this table that people can come to play and feel acceptance, to really feel the feelings that they're feeling. And also, I just wanted to say that specificity and leads to vulnerability. Vulnerability is actually the golden rule of comedy. It's what brings people to a space that they then themselves feel ready to open up. So specificity is a tool that anyone can carry with them in their day-to-day life and interactions. And when we're specific in the way that we communicate our feelings and wants to others, this really forges that stronger relationship rather than just skimming the surface with our vagaries. I think being vague is a beautiful mask we can hide behind, but there's no truth in that. And you are limiting and cutting yourself off with vaguity. When someone might come up to you or talk to you in a Zoom chat or talk to you from 6 feet apart or whatever it is nowadays, and they'll say, hey, how's it going? How are you? And we answer with something like, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm good. Same old, staying at home. You've actually just slammed the door in their face when it comes to being clear and communicating with them. Because if you actually answered how you were feeling and were specific, saying something like, I'm good. I actually got to talk to my mom today on FaceTime, and that connection brought me joy. Or you know what? I'm actually finding a real sense of flow here now that I'm working inside. I've really worked it out and I found my work-life balance. That opens the door for someone else to be vulnerable and share with you specifically what's happening in their life. And it's like reaching out for a chance to communicate with them. So what I just wanted to really pass along and say is the more specific we can be, and it's like Steffi said, the more we know ourselves and the more we bring that bit of ourselves to those communications and opportunities we have to touch someone via Zoom or 6 feet apart, the clearer and better off we will be as a community. and the clearer those communications will be. And you have no idea how much you can change someone's life.
Oh,
So
thank you.
that's it.
Thank you for that. The
Thanks, Kata.
specificity, say that 5 times. And vaguity, I love those. They're so pertinent because the specificity is, okay, I talk about being an adult survivor of sexual and physical trauma. That's going all the way up into teenagehood. Now, when it comes to post-trauma, our best skill is being a chameleon, being vague, being just so that you can't quite see, because I don't need you to see. I don't want you to see, because when I was vulnerable, I was not safe. At least that was for me. So the rest of that time post-trauma is spent making sure I'm safe. So when you talk about specificity, that goes in direct contravention to many people who are living post-trauma, and over 90% of our world has been traumatized. So that's a lot of people walking around trying to keep you from seeing the real. A lot of people. So I love the fact that you spoke about specificity. I love the fact that you talked about being vague, being a mask, because being the queen or king of masks isn't helpful. There's a time in our lives when we're going through trauma where masks saves our lives. It helps us survive. But then it no longer serves. And knowing when it's time to release those masks is so key. So I love the fact that you talk about specificity and releasing those masks. And there was a comment from the audience saying, yes, Victoria grills us with specifics. So somebody who's been through your, like, get specific, as I have, is speaking to it, and probably in gratitude, because it's a tremendous amount of a wonderful self-work and self-development in finding clarity to find the specific. What is it that I want? What do I want to say? What's my message? What's key for me right now in this moment? And how do I make that happen? You know, Tony, it was because of Tony that I got access to Victoria. And Tony and Victoria are awesome when it comes to the whole, you know, shifting ourselves to the point where we can feel okay to be real and understand that just what we're feeling in that moment is enough. We don't have to concoct anything else, like under the guise of acting. We don't have to layer something on. And I think it's directly applicable to life. Like, we always feel that we have to do something that much extra to be accepted by those we care about, to be accepted at work, to be accepted in our business. We have to do something else when really all we need to do is be us, be ourselves amplified. Can you speak about that, Tony?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Kata. So beautifully
anytime.
said. And this panel is, man, this panel is fantastic. I'm writing copious amounts of notes, and like everything is just resonating. Yes. So I come to the, you know, I didn't invent this phrase. It's quite common in the life coaching world, but I really use it a lot, which is I am enough. And I love this saying for many reasons. The main reason being that I believe life is an inner game. Acting is an inner game. Improv is an inner game. Entrepreneurship is an inner game. Thoughts become things. We are manifestors, and therefore, you know, we tend to be we tend to go about our life putting band-aids on things. And I know we're talking about this a lot now, but we're thinking, if I just do this, then I can achieve. Or if I just climb that mountain, then I will get the medal that tells me I'm now good enough. And I always come back to, with my clients, with my students, with my colleagues, you don't need the medal. You don't need the mountain. You are the medal. You are the mountain. You are everything you need right now. And so this core belief, I know we were talking about core beliefs earlier. I took so many notes, I can't remember who said what, but someone said something about core beliefs and it was great. That core belief, I am enough, and fill in the blank here. I am good enough. I am strong enough. I am sexy enough. I am pretty enough. I am interesting enough, etc. That is all you need. That if there's one thing you need, it's that piece of energy, and resonating on that is everything. And then building from there, and building for the process, not for the end result. And I think when we're talking about business training, when we're talking about productivity, anything like that, there's this kind of like, you know, underbelly that no one really talks about, that is pressure. We put this pressure on ourselves, and it's out of a negative belief. It's out of a feeling of not being enough, a feeling of scarcity, lack mindset. And I think what we need to really start doing is we need to start reframing what success looks like. And we're seeing now that everything has shifted without our permission, right? The whole world's kind of completely flipped on its head. And now we're starting to rethink, we're coming to what's important again. We're coming to the core, we're connecting with each other. We're finding ways to really latch on to what's important. So that was my big intro into talking about authenticity, which is I Am Enough is all about being authentic and aligning with authenticity. I love what Heather said about authenticity and building her whole business around it, because it is so vital. I want to tell you that I changed my shirt 3 times before today, and then caught myself doing it, being like, oh yeah, I'm good. I could have worn the first shirt. So we do it, right? We do it all the time. I want to tell you that every time I'm about to launch a course or teach an online class, I don't sleep. I'm up all night. And the more I accept that, the more I'm authentic about that, like telling everyone right now, the more people connect with me, because ultimately we are storytellers, right? And we love story. And we were speaking to this before about if someone shows you their heart, your heart connects to theirs. And there's all these old mentalities around business that are very fake, very one-dimensional, come from, again, scarcity, lack mindset. But when we come from a place of abundance, from a place of oneness, from a place of being enough, people can feel that. My connection to authenticity started from childhood. And I love that you were talking about childhood earlier, Kata. I spent the majority of my childhood pretending to be something else and coming to terms with my sexuality. And that really is where my journey into being a life coach, being an actor, being an entrepreneur, being an acting coach, that's kind of where it all stems from. And when I close my eyes to meditate, I see that, mini me, like running through the field, trying to like figure out how to be tolerable to people. And that energy right there taught me really everything I needed to know in terms of, by the way, I never know everything I need to know. There's always more, but it taught me the core value of I am enough. I am more than tolerable. And if someone doesn't feel that way, then that is something they need to come to and start to align with, and has nothing to do with me. So I know I'm like at 3 minutes now, but the last thing I want to say, Kata, is like the business in the times of COVID. How do you approach your business authentically? Well, you approach your business authentically by approaching your business authentically. You are your business as an entrepreneur, as an employee, as anyone. You are your business, and people will resonate with you only if you are your true primal instinctive self, because they are also an animal just like you, and animals will resonate on other animals. But if you're putting a mask on, like you were saying so beautifully, Kata, we get to become experts at wearing masks. I'm blocking you from getting through to me. And so being honest about your hardships, being honest about the fact that right now things are different, things are shifting, and coming to really what got you into business in the first place, which wasn't money, which wasn't, a 6-figure year, which wasn't climbing the mountain. It was helping someone, serving, and changing someone's life. And I think we're all coming back to that now, and that's where true business thrives.
Thank you so much for that. Oh, Heather, I'm coming to you. There were just too many bridges, authenticity and business. But before we get to you, I just want to say that that whole piece of our journey aligning with our business journey is so key. And people think that it's only because we're going online now that this is the case, but it's the case because we're not as tolerant about incongruencies that we sense in people who are running their businesses. I mean, we think back to like Tammy Faye Baker and her husband who, ran a business telling people that how, they were going to save the souls of everybody. And meanwhile, they were violating people by taking their money and doing awful things, like just taking money off of people. There was a huge discrepancy between who they were and what they were doing for business. But nowadays, what's happening is that people are realizing I need to be a lot more discerning about where I put my money. And they're going to start relying more and more on intuition because we're doing stuff online. It's not going to be the salesperson that's standing right in front of you to say different things and different things in the environment to distract you and overwhelm you. People need to find clarity before they go out for that exchange. And that's why I love the fact that you talk about, from the business side of things, Tony, and everyone who's mentioned it, that there's such an alignment between who we are and what we do, that people will now appreciate more readily, because we have to be more discerning. We have to be in a space of picking and choosing more carefully.
Well, and
So,
if I may,
yes.
Kata, business is all about an exchanging of trust, right? No one is going to invest with you unless they trust you. No one is going to welcome you into their life unless they feel like they can trust you. And I think ultimately trust is one of the few things that you cannot fake. You can't fake trust. Trust is developed, it's real, it's authentic, and it has to be earned. And it's earned through a very, like Victoria was saying, very vulnerable approach to our work. And I think that's, finding that balance is so important.
And you know, the earning, the trust piece, because for anyone post-trauma, trauma is what we focus on. That's what True to Soul focuses on. The power post-trauma. Anyone who's been able to survive it has a fortitude that's magnificent. Nothing short of what we have experienced before can actually stop us. If people understand that, there's so much more we can do. And so that piece that you gave just now, Tony, I just want to give a question before we get to Heather. This question is from Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Mwah. Some people, me, aren't good with ambiguity. When people are vague and you never know what they are thinking. How do your experts recommend dealing with that? Like at our workshop when we first met. Okay, so I'll get to the story of the workshop if we have time, because that's a good story. But before we get to our last two panelists, because I'm really raring to go there as well, did someone want to take that question? Anyone can take that question. So I'll repeat it. When people are vague and you never know what they're thinking, how do you recommend to deal with that?
So Victoria addressed that a little bit about that's a hard word to say. Specificity, I can't even say it, is to Nicole's question, is what's their need when they're being vague, right? It's called compassionate communications and nonviolent communications. What's their need? Maybe their need is to protect themselves, that they are being vague because they're not comfortable being authentic. So Nicole, what's your need in the conversation? If you need them to be more specific, compassionately ask them. You can ask with, would you be willing? I'm not clear on how you just described yourself, or I'm not clear with what you said. Would you be willing? I'd love to hear a little more. Would you be willing? Compassionately asking for, again, to your point, Victoria, specifics with compassion. Because sometimes vagueness comes from insecurity, and to Tony's point of not feeling enough. That's just my answer there.
Thank you so much. And we're going to come back to that if we have time, Nicole. Thank you for that fabulous question. We're going to move on to Heather to talk about authenticity and business, because she is a queen with that. You have the floor, Heather.
Thank you. I'm really appreciating some of the things that are going on in this conversation, you know, talking about not slapping a Band-Aid on things, and the opportunity, taking advantage of the opportunities that we have where everything's kind of slowed down, or for some of us it's sped up in certain ways. And you know, Tony, what you said about when you show someone your heart, you feel more connected to them, or when you see somebody's heart, you feel more connected. I'm not sure exactly the words, but it makes me think of a tree. And you know, when a tree is in a storm, the reason that it doesn't break is because it's flexible. And the side effect of that is the roots have to go down deeper. And I think that that's a real opportunity that you have if you're a business owner, or if you're thinking about going into business for yourself in this time, is to look for that clarity and to look at what am I in business for? And we can make mistakes by thinking that those are financial goals, or thinking that those are certain goals or milestones in our business. But I think what it really needs to be is the essence of what our business offers. And for me, that is making people's dreams come true. And if I can stay true to that essence, then even as cheesy as it sounds, that's really the essence of what I do. If I follow that essence rather than a certain milestone or a certain service that I have to follow, that means that I can be nimble when things change, and that I can move and flow with my business in an organic way. When it comes to authenticity, I really love some of them, that we have some psychotherapist here, and I got really nerdy for brain science around 2016. And if you look at triune brain theory and the way that the brain works, I know it's not the most modern theory, but we have the reptilian structures of our brain surrounded by the limbic system, surrounded by the neocortex, which is the most evolved system of our brain. But we make 95% of our decisions with our limbic system and our reptilian brain, which means that we are motivated by feelings. So that tells me that, you know, Kate was talking earlier about all the ways that businesses have run. Sorry, my birds want to talk too. But that's actually very counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive to our nature as human beings. We are in an age of limbic branding where people are looking for a community and for a place to belong and for someone who feels like them and vibes like them. So, like, if you think about Harley Davidson, if you are a Harley person, if you never buy a bike, you're devoted to that, you know, bandana, that jacket, that belt buckle. And if you ever had the money to buy a bike, it'd be a Harley. There's no question. You're not going Victory, you're going Harley, right? Because you're a diehard. If we want to create that kind of community and tribes with our brands, so that's really important to know. What's your essence? You know, what are those things that you would pick out? Just like a crow is drawn to shiny things, what are they drawn to? And how do you want people to feel around you? Like, what parts of you are they going to resonate with? Like, I can look at each one of these panelists and see in their background certain things that tells me so much about them, from that geometric artwork that Marcelane has, or for Steffi, that she's into clean lines and clear colors. Sorry, my birds are going nuts because I'm getting excited. But yeah, for me, it's all about how you want people to feel, and then how you earn and how you connect with people. That's what's so important. So for me, there's three main staples: who you're connecting with, what you do, and why you're doing it. And that all leads you to the essence of your brand and your business.
Oh, love it. Love it. Yes, thank you, Heather. Hopefully we'll get someone, all of you back for more, because an hour is not enough time to pick your brains. So thank you, Heather, for what you were talking about when it comes to those W's, like the who, the what, and the why, right? But the way that you express it with the emotional piece of it, I think is even more fundamental, because there's always been this kind of hard edge around business for a long, long time. And now we're understanding that there's actually power in the vulnerability. There's power in the authenticity, even more so than following all the rules as they have been set out in history. That's mind-blowing. And it means that the business aspect, the business arena, can be occupied by whomever is passionate and has clarity and wants to share and is willing to find someone who can help them with the logistics of doing the business. Because maybe someone doesn't want to focus on the business side. Maybe you just want to have the content and the idea, and find people like, you know, Heather to say, okay, this is how you put it together. You know, I want to actually move from what you've been talking about, Heather, to today. And it's really key to understand that we have a lot of people who run business from home pre-COVID. People who are, you know, running the house, taking care of the kids, maybe even have a full-time and business, full-time job and business. And that would be Day. Day is a person who's a manager in the government, has her own business, a manager with True to Soul as well. I'm like just like taking advantage of that managerial skill, and has children that are just amazing. Amazing. And then when COVID came along and I saw chalkboards and like schedules and like, I'm like, holy camole, can somebody has to hear about how this is done. So what I'd love from you, Dave, because you presented points about just clarity as parents. I mean, it's not just all about juggling this stuff. There's so much that is needed from the standpoint of a parent who's taking care of children in the midst of COVID-19. That would be great for us to chat about. I'd love for you to, you know, talk about that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. One thing I do want to say is, I mean, for years, because I have a 22 or 23-year-old child, or sorry, young adult. And something I find that I all the points that I'm giving, I did with him. And I feel like I was doing it with my younger kids, the other kids, and COVID kind of slammed everything out the window. And I feel like I kind of had to start over again. So one thing that I would want to say is with regards to clarity in children is I try to speak the behavior that I want to see. So for example, using positive words when I'm telling them things like, please put your clothes away, as opposed to yelling, stop making such a big mess, which yelling is something that I've have to work on as well. And it's almost like I have to redo it all over again. But speaking the words in the way that I want them to behave. Another point that I have to make to the parents is, especially those with younger children and toddlers, is spending time with them, even if it means 15 minutes or 20 minutes with each family member, if you have the time. I found that had saved a lot of the ankle grabbing and the clinging, because that's what they were looking for, was to have some time and alone with mom. And it's something that we used to do before, but I found with COVID, there was just too much to do at home. So I kind of lost that. So I've picked that back up, spending a few minutes with each of the children. It's worked out to about 15, 20 minutes, not every day, but when they recognize that that's going to happen, some personal time, I find that it helps to their mental well-being. And as Kate had mentioned, I was one of those parents who decided to do a schedule. I might call it more a routine now, but because my kids respond well and they know what's going to happen next, which is important to them, it's less of an argument when I say, for example, no to requests to do electronics outside of educational programs, because they know on the schedule they're supposed to be doing school right now, and free time comes at a certain time. And I found that helps everything go much more smoother. I am using gaming as leverage, and I've used this scheduling to bring down the amount of gaming and TV watching that they're doing. And that helps to be clear with the kids and to try to stick to what you say. So I can tell you, my son, for example, is very aware that I will turn off the TV if he's been given his 30 and 10-minute warning and it's expired. And more often than not, when I say it's time, he will stop playing most of the time, even mid-game. So one thing, as I mentioned about shouting less, I find staying calm and saying calming words have pretty much had the same result as my yelling, but with less stress and anxiety to both me and the kids. So it's helped me to keep my mind more clear instead of reeling. Hard to do, something you're gonna have to build up to, but I would suggest it heavily for everyone. For those times that I feel like I'm going to scream, which happens more often than not, because there's so many people in our household, even when I'm alone, I'm waiting for someone to burst through the door. It helps that I give myself a 10-second pause. That's why I loved when Marcelane had mentioned about reset. That word resonated hugely with me, because I mean, that's perfect for exactly what I'm talking about. Allowing me to have that pause, practice some heavy breathing, and then continuing from there. Otherwise, it allows me to, I find that it helps me to make things more clear in my mind and less overwhelming and less reaction from emotion. So those are just some of the things that I would suggest. And really quickly, I'm going to ask Kata to.
Oh, you're muted.
Am I muted the whole time?
No, we heard everything. It's just when you said, I'm going to ask Kata, it muted.
Kata, do you mind if I step in for a minute?
Absolutely not. I just want to see, what was it that you want to ask Day, and then I'll put a pin in it.
I just threw a quick link for for parents who have children ages 12 and under, for financial, small little token that the government's giving us.
Okay.
But I want to throw that out. If you can post that as well for parents out there.
Please do.
It is only in Ontario, but I can say BC has something that offers a little bit more for the parents. So for those parents in BC to look into that, I would say parents in all the provinces to look into any assistance the government is helping financially. This one that for Ontario is helping with parents who are paying or educating their kids at home with the assistance of the teachers, helping them get extra resources. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, and I will for sure share that widely. Thank you, Marcelane. Thank you so much for that, Day, especially the piece about the resetting as a parent. We don't always allow ourselves that time, as parents. My husband and I are empty nesting, but still, it doesn't matter. Still got memories. Anyway, what were you saying, Marcelane?
Okay, so I wanted, the theme of today's conversation is around clarity, right? So let me just start with, I need to reset around even being amongst people in this forum, because I'm usually like good at like sitting with somebody and feeding off their energy, and I find it's kind of hard because I don't actually not in my space, right? So I'm
yes.
resetting here.
Yes.
But I want to go back to the piece around clarity and the connection between that and authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because earlier you talked about for yourself that, sometimes, you're the chameleon, and I find awareness helps with clarity, right? And no judgment of that chameleon or not sharing, because, knowing where you are and having that awareness helps you to be clear of what you're doing at that moment. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, when you bring yourself in that situation, that's the best you can do at that time for yourself.
I would love to echo that as well, if I may, Marcelane.
Yes.
I love what you're saying. I think awareness is so key. One thing that I do sometimes when I work with actors, when we're working on a script for the first time, or if I'm working with someone doing a keynote, helping someone in business, is when we're approaching it, I empower them to speak whatever they're feeling in the moment on the line. Sometimes we approach a line and we have some kind of an agenda behind it, or we have something we want it to do. And I think there's something really key about wherever you're at, come from that point. And if in this moment you're literally thinking nothing, you have nothing, then play nothing. If you're in your head and you are seeing yourself judge it, then just let that out. And you're absolutely right. There's a really interesting paradox here between being authentic, but also being authentic when you're not authentic. And I think that's important as well, is to be like, hey, I started my talk earlier by saying I changed my shirt and I don't sleep when I launch a program. And I'm the first to tell people, be present, be authentic, be in the moment. But also, you're never going to be. And I think that's, and it's the, like you said, the resetting that is actually the journey, right? So I love that you said that.
Thank you so much for that, everyone. Thank you. Dave, yes.
Well, just really quickly, this gift that Marcelane has given us, given for those of us who didn't know how to articulate it best, with the resetting, that works amazing with children as well, because she said, Marcelane, you mentioned that you got that from your son. I would encourage the parents to push that back on the children. So there's times when my son is in the mid tantrum, always surrounding about gaming. And sometimes it helps to just stop and pause and say, breathe. And sometimes if he allows me to give him a hug, because when he's really agitated, he sometimes doesn't want you to touch him, or sometimes he just wants that hug. But I do tend to try to touch him when I tell him to stop and breathe and take the breaths with me. And bring it is resetting. It is exactly what it is. So I would encourage parents to do that with their kids at any age, because it's a lesson that we can always use, even when our parents are not there, right? So,
and it's language that the kids understand, because my son was only about 10, I think, at the time, right? So it reset, like they kind of intuitively know what that means, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there have been discussions. Sorry, Heather, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I really think that that's powerful in working too. For myself, what I do is I create rituals, because there's so much going on in my house. I'm a solo parent too. And and I'm very creative and a little bit ADD. So, or a lot of it, I'm not sure. But when lots of things are going on, I need to create rituals. So I'll put on a sweater or a jacket, I'll burn incense, I'll put on a candle, I'll put on music, and lots of things to give myself cue that it's time to go into focus mode. Because you've got more than one thing going on, and these are things you can do for yourself. So I try to do things to make my work sexy and appealing, and to snap back. Yeah. So that sounds a lot like what you're talking about with resetting.
There's a sacredness. And before I finish that sentence, I just want to point out that I just reposted what they shared about resources in the chat. So you can take a look there. And of course, just Google for your respective province or wherever you're parachuting in here from. But there's something sacred about the whole journey, the search for clarity. It is a sacred journey, and it's very unique, as much as it's also in common with every single human being out there. We're all searching, same thing as we're searching for purpose, we're searching for truth. The challenge is sometimes that because we're taught to seek externally mostly, and we're taught to value that more than we value the internal stuff, that it gets challenging when we may not be in a space that's really valuing us or validating us, or we're in a space that, you know, we're just not finding what we need to be nourished. So I love the fact that all of you had shared so many poignant points on creating new norms, on balancing, on self-regulation, resetting, creating that space, you know, honoring your truth and you know, being specific. Everything that you guys have spoken about is so internally motivated, internally nourished, and then we express that to the world. Our clarity in looking at the world is our clarity that we've gained inside. And we'll often find that our environments are reflective of our level of clarity, you know, for different reasons. You could say chicken and egg, who knows? I'm creating the mess because I'm got stuff going on here, or the stuff out here is contributing to the mess in here. It's back and forth. But if we could recognize what we need, that little bubble, and I mention it almost at every Be W.I.S.E table talk, a little bubble, just to employ some of these tips. You know, when we get up in the morning, taking 5 minutes rather than jumping out of bed, just the 5 minutes to employ some of this, whether it's a reset. If we carried something to our bed, an anger or some kind of worry, and it's made its way through the night and we wake up with it, just 5 minutes of grace and release and lack of judgment and just being. And then before going to bed, it's so key just to release. You can't do anything in the bed except sleep. Well, there are a few things you can do, but I'm just saying that 5 minutes when we're getting ready to go to sleep is really important. A nice bubble to reset, to, you know, just figure out, what do I want? It doesn't have to be a big life answer. It's like, literally, what do I want right now? And maybe the answer is sleep. And if you can't get the sleep, what would help me right now? So these tips, I really love your generosity, panelists. I love the love that you expressed in being here and sharing all of this and sharing your journey and your knowledge and wisdom. And I hope you come back because you guys are awesome. So audience members, thank you for coming out. You guys have been so integral to this entire process. Thank you for your feedbacks in the polls. They're full. Thank you. And I hope to see you back again as well. So for the moment, just for the moment, remember to be well, be informed, be safe and empowered, and share who you are. Be as clear as you can and share who you are. Be true to you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Well.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye,
I'll leave the
guys.
chat up for a few minutes if you want to copy any notes from there.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we allowed to speak?
That was amazing, you guys. Yeah.
Are we off the
I'm
tape?
coming
Yay,
back.
I didn't know we were allowed to talk.
We can talk. We can talk. We have some more minutes, and what I'll do is, it looks like there's still people in the audience, so just be mindful of that. There are still people here, so we can feel free to talk, and let me know. Would you guys like this recorded or not?
That's fine.
Okay. You guys are awesome.
Yes,
Holy.
please.
That was
my
very
goodness.
good.
Candace, can I ask you a question? You were talking about like this new normal and bringing in a lot of the good and the bad, and I think several people were reflecting on that. I find myself currently looking forward into this, what is our new normal, with a sense of fear, because I feel like never before as an artist have I been as seen and as supported by my government, by my community, and specifically like the Canadian entertainment industry. And I'm fearful that all of that will go away, and once again the American industry will take over and I will vanish into the background. Is there any advice that you could give for artists like me, or anyone who might be feeling that fear of the law and that like grieving of what's going to be taken away from us when we go to the new normal?
Yeah. Let's check that I'm not muted here. No, I'm not. I think the biggest thing is when we're talking about this, we're talking about so many pieces that we have no way of predicting how it's going to play out, right? And so that's where the fear comes from. Fear comes from lack of control, from lack of ability to know what's going to happen next. And I think that if you can look at your fear, if you can actually take some time and reflect on why is it that thought is so scary? Because I've worked so hard to get where I am, because this feels really nice to finally be acknowledged. Or, if you can start to build that awareness in yourself, then you have a better understanding of what you do next. And I think that in particular with this situation, I was saying to a client of mine, the only kind of role we have of how this is going to go is The Walking Dead. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to go like that, So we kind of have to create it as we go. And we have to recognize that, yes, there is going to be this drive to go back to how it was. But it's up to us to push this forward, to push forward with the pieces that are really good. It's up to us to, speak with the government, to lobby with the government that the pieces that have really come out of us, the learning and the growth. And I would say, I don't think that you're alone. I am, in my work, I am concerned about the mental health pandemic that is going to follow this physical health pandemic as people try to adjust and try to figure out how this works and what it looks like. And the fear that we have, for example, in the children who are going back to school after we've spent 8 weeks telling them that home is the only safe place. So I don't think your fear is unfounded. I don't think you're alone in that, but I do think that it's a really good space to just reflect and consider, what do you need to be comfortable? What do you need to move forward with this? Do you have to start to ask the questions differently? Do you have to change how you ask for what you need within this new world? Do we have more allies than we've ever had before in making those changes that we want to make, right? So I think there's a lot of potential to change and grow. But it's definitely a scary time. And I would say that that's a pretty universal feeling right now, is that fear and grief of what we've lost and what we might lose in the future. And that's a really normal process. And so it's good to feel it and to acknowledge it and to just work your way through understanding it and where it's coming from for you.
I have to say as well, Victoria, that I think as a person who is involved in the acting side, as well as this other space here in the holism, that you are very well positioned. And the reason I say that is because of your history in improv. So that talent and skill that you have in improvising on the spot and creating something different from what's been expected or what is expected or what has been normal is actually one of your aces in the hole. The reason why is because the acting industry, it's very it's cemented, it's like formulaic, it's got to go like this in order to be successful. And whereas improv, even as it's part of that beast, so to speak, it's its own beast in that it's your training and your experience in improvisation has allowed you the capacity to think outside of the box, to create something completely different, a different space. So as much as you've got all of this experience in the area of, the areas that you've been in and you've created a success, you're in a prime position to redefine what you want success to look like. And the reason why is because the acting industry right now is scrambling. And this is true for all of the industries. We're scrambling because we've never been through this in contemporary times. We don't know what it's meant to look like. So we're so receptive. We're so receptive. I just did an audition yesterday where I was with the help of my husband, who I'm fortunate enough is in broadcasting and IT. I was filming my kitchen and doing my voiceover audition in my kitchen. It was crazy. And they want to know what equipment you have. They want to, this is something that's different. It's unprecedented. So I guess just to concisely say and just move, add on to what was so well said by Candace is that you are very well positioned to lead in this area, actually redefine what success is going to look like, because you have that capacity. You have a willingness to create new synaptic connections. And not everyone has that willingness or skill set. Some people will take a bit of time to acquire that, whereas you've got a head start because that's what you've done for a living. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. That's amazing and helpful. And it's interesting also to see how everyone else is, being from different walks of life, like how we've all differently been affected by this and the different ways we are adapting and thinking outside the box.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Victoria, it's a good question. It's a good question. I think we all have things that happen during this time that we don't want to lose, right? What can we maintain that out of this time that keeps it better? If you've had support from the Canadian industry, how can you maintain it? If things have happened that were helpful to you, how can you make it better out of this? You know, I always think of that question again, just one thing. What can we all do that we learn from this time to make it better out of this time? You know, I had a conversation with my brothers recently. I have 2 half brothers, and they were like, oh, I don't know, people are going to go back to the same old thing, same old. And I'm like, really? It's up to you. You know, if you don't want to do the same thing or you want that support, how can you ensure that it happens? You know, either writing to your fellow actors, let's say you and Tony and or people you know, write to your fellow and say, let's keep this community. Let's maintain this community. So I think it's a beautiful question. It makes us, everyone think, what can I maintain that worked out that I don't want to lose moving ahead? So thank you for that question.
Yeah, I was glad that you asked the question as well, because I mean, besides the fears that I have work-wise, the fears with my children, their education level, their mindset, are they going along the path that they're supposed to be going? I'm out of touch with the teacher in the sense that I don't know how they are compared to where they should be anymore, because all you're doing is submitting assignments, talking to the parenting community. Some of them have just bowed out altogether. They're not submitting anything whatsoever. Some are going too far and they're like on the ball, which I'm like, slow down, because you're making us look, the rest of us look bad. But I don't know what level are mentally, homework-wise, are they at the right place? When they go back to school, will they be behind? Will they be ahead? Will they be able to adjust to whatever norm happens in September? And so those fears alone right there. And also, will they be able to adjust when it comes down to leaving home again and going out on the bus? Because I'm used to saying, we're staying inside, we're staying inside. Now I'm going to be like, let's walk to the bus and get on there and get out into the school. So all those fears, aside from just my personal fears, I have all those fears for my kids as well. And I don't even, am I mentally supporting them the way in the level that I should be? Is there something I should be doing more? Something I should be doing less? Am I giving them too much pressure?
Day, can I speak to that a little bit?
That I'm staring at Candace the whole time I'm talking. By the way, I'm staring at Candace like it's a personal conversation.
I would say it's a valid question, right? Like already with my clients that I see who are kids now, we're starting to talk about like, how are we going to handle this when we go back? Because we've given them the message. We've given them the message for the last 8, we can't go out because it's not safe. Like we can't go out because there's this virus. And now we're going to say, okay, well, the virus isn't quite gone, but off you go, you know? But here's the piece I would say to you, Day, is this is what I want you to think about. When we get back in September, because I got to be honest, I don't see us going back before then. And if we do, it's going to be a gong show.
I don't think so either.
You two don't think that? Wow.
The schools will not go back before September. That's my guess at this point. And with the discussions I've had with other professionals, healthcare, and that, there's a very strong consensus that schools at least are out at this point. But here's the piece that I think about is when we go back in September, the biggest job the schools are going to have to do is figure out where should we be. You said, how do I know if my kids are where they should be and have they done what they need to do? You know what? We've burnt the roadmap, baby. It is gone. At this point, it is gone. And there is no way with the system that we have for public schooling that we are actually even capable of having any kind of standardized level expectation for kids. And I would say, even looking at the work that's coming out, I know I work with teachers who are so stressed about, are they giving enough? Are they giving too much? And I work with parents who are going, this is too much. This is not enough. None of us have a clue. We're all in this together. And so when we get to September, the best thing that you can do, if you as a parent are trying to figure out, what do I do? The best thing that you can do is be as honest with your kids as you can. Connect with your children's teachers as much as you can. Make them sick of your face. Get to know them. Become their partners, because we are going to have to be their partners next year. To catch up to, and catch up to what? We may have to just redefine the whole level thing to begin with.
And I think that's the key.
I agree.
That's actually the key. I think what's happened is that our systems, the justice system, the health system, the educational system, all of the systems were actually in a very dysfunctional way pre-COVID-19. A lot of Band-Aids, trying to keep it together, because we've evolved as human beings, and the systems that we built so many decades ago don't apply to us as we are now. And because we are unwilling to actually do fundamental changes, and I'm talking about everything from policing, because been there, done that, to the educational system, it would cost a lot of money and a lot of time. And we're like, oh, let's make it work. Let's make it work. So now we are in such a prime position. I love
this is our one shot.
This is our shot. This is our shot. That's why, when you ask that question, Victoria, I love the question because it applies across the board. This is our opportunity to employ our creativity, our imagination, get that clarity. That's why these talks are here, because I want to dispense with the construct of fear, because it's just a construct created out of we don't know. We don't know. So why don't we go internally and say, what do we want? What do we want our education systems to look like? What is actually relevant to us right now? What is helpful for my child and for me right now? What do we want policing, all the industries that we're talking about to look like? Because it can revert back, it can regress if we cling to what was there before. If we cling so tightly to it and try to manifest it again, we will do that because we're powerful manifestors. So if we allow ourselves, like these you people, all of us who do things in a way where we're willing to just reach out into the unknown and pull something back in that's unlike almost anything that anyone's seen before. If we can have a community that's supportive when we're vulnerable and sharing something like that, something that's really unusual, we can actually create a different world. We're in the process of it. We're on the cusp of it. This online piece is only a small piece of it. This is not the whole thing.
Right. So Kata, Heather, and Day, you're a team. Let's see a sheet from True to Soul on the areas that can be better out of this. And Candace and Victoria and Tony and everyone else can help. Seriously, I want to see areas of just a simple sheet of if you can just improve I'm bugging my MP and my local counselor. I'm like, I have a sheet, and they're like, okay, they don't care. I'm just Steffi Black, but I'm like, there's just little things out of this. Flip the classroom. Why are we sitting kids behind a desk all day when they need to run? Make it different. It doesn't have to be this huge thing in one environment. Maybe you can I can take the bus on Tuesdays instead of the car. I'm not saying everything, but I'd love to see a True to Soul network overview from maybe all the panelists on I'll help. We have a month, right?
That is fantastic. I love that. And we have 8 industries that we do identify. So we can get this done.
We can get it done.
Yes.
That's okay. I'm just thinking, Kate, about how you, if I, in my mind, I'm hearing the difference between how you are talking about the future and how Victoria is talking about the future. And I am mindful of Heather's discussion about the reptilian brain. Heather, I am I teach biological psychotherapy every day. It is my favorite. I have my brain is sitting right here, baby, and it's part of what I do. But I think that the two of you bring me to such a great place, because here's the thing. In terms of what's happening in our bodies, we are all predicting. Our brains are constantly predicting. How is this going to go? What's going to happen? And Victoria, you are predicting, it's going to go back to how it was. And Day is predicting, like, oh, my kids are going to struggle. But Katie, you are predicting, we have a possibility here. And even although we're all in the same situation, we're going through these very similar physical feelings within ourselves, our reaction to it is so different, purely because of what we see, whether we see this as an opportunity, whether we see a way to make it an opportunity, or whether we see it as, oh, all that heaviness is just going to come back. So I think that when I talk about connecting with your kids' teachers, or when I talk about, we've talked about talking to other people in the industry, in the acting industry, this is your chance. And I would challenge you to change your fear into excitement just by thinking about it slightly differently. Reframe it as an opportunity. This is an opportunity that in schools that we have not had as parents in years and years and years. Very slowly over the last 2 decades, parents have been pushed out of the classroom and out of the entire school.
Yeah.
Baby, I'm back, and they are not closing those doors again. As Canadian artists within the industry, we have a similar situation, right? You've been fighting tooth and nail to get in, and now you're here. And you know what? Don't let them shut the door. This is your chance to push through. And if you can shift your thinking in that way, then that same feeling, because we've all got that same feeling in our stomachs, but it'll stop being fear and it'll start being excitement and energy. And when you put that into your business, that excitement and that energy into what you do, you will make great things happen. Together or alone.
Love it.
We're never alone.
Yeah, no, we're never alone. What does, you talk about the brain level. What does the soul want? If people aren't as scared of that topic, right? What does our soul level want? And it wants something new. And the universe stopped. So now we have a month left. I'm guessing here, not for schools, but a month left. What do we want out of this last month?
Oh my gosh, people, man. Do you ever get so excited that things just hurt? Like my teeth are hurting. I got everything in my body just spiked because the collectives that are forming, we've got these various tribes all over the place.
Yeah.
When they all connect, we're looking at, it's a month, but it's not. We're creating, you mentioned a tree, Heather. There's a huge tree right now that we're all a part of. And so all the industries aren't actually separate. They're connected. That's part of my work. That's what I'm here for, is I've been able to bridge a lot of industries, the 8 industries I'm talking about, because of the work that I do. And I see connectivity through all of them. So when someone says, I just feel like this is just only particular to whatever it is, policing, acting, there's a commonality in all of the industries, which means that when you're coming up with concepts, it pays to share it with like-minded individuals in your particular industry, but it'll pay bigger dividends to share it outside of the industry. Right now, that's really important. And the reason why it's important is because we're revolutionizing all of the industries. That's actually what's happening right now. Beyond COVID, beyond a month, what's happening is that we're revolutionizing the way that each industry is operating. So what I'm looking at is for, like Steffi pointed to, that list. I am looking for like-minded individuals who have enough fire in the belly and enough expansiveness in thought and imagination and creativity that we can actually work together to cross the industries and do an inter type of collaborative thing in revolutionizing these spaces. I'm not talking about an impossibility. Like sometimes we can aim too big and we think, "Oh, yeah, okay, sure, that sounds great." And then we'll get off and it's like, okay, that was cute. But I'm talking about capturing ideas, things that you thought of maybe before COVID. It's like, I wish this could have been doing this instead. I wish I could have done that instead. I'm asking people to capture that, actually capture it, and let's collab. Because people told me before True to Soul came to be that it couldn't be. And now I'm sitting on a network that's about to launch our website in about anyway, what I'm saying is that each of us have been in a position where what we're doing right now was a seed. It was a seed in our mind. And because we loved it and nourished it and believed it and knew it so deeply, we manifested it. Now we put those together and we can actually do that across the board. It won't be a completely different thing in a month, no, but we are actually planting seeds right now that will grow into something so different from what we've been living up until this point.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, like one last thing on that note, because I feel so passionate about it, like you, Kata, is before people were struggling to get to work every day, you know, day with kids and trying to get out the door. And I knew people would go, oh, they can't work remotely. Like so many corporate types I knew were like, oh no, I can't let my staff do that. No trust, right? No. Now I'm like, I ask everybody I know runs a business. I'm like, okay, you're going to let your staff work. And I'm thinking of all the moms with kids. You're going to let your staff. Oh yeah, I've so my client today gave me the best news. He works at a bank. I won't name names. Most conservative department. I said, you push for that remote working. He's an introvert. It's hard for him to go in every day. I said, you push the stats for why you're a better worker. He emailed me today. He gets to work 2 to 3 days a week at home.
Yes!
Right? Like that's honoring his psyche. You know, I couldn't have heard better news. I'm like, you did it. You did it.
Yeah.
And
her excitement broke the internet.
I was hanging on her every word. I was like, and?
I was hanging on it.
Oh.
I do have to go because I'm in one of the rooms. Most of the children sleep.
No problem.
So
this was fabulous.
Sure. I mean,
huge. Day, Day, what do you say to that as a mother of many kids, you know?
I'm so sorry, Steffi.
You froze.
Sorry.
Glitched for a huge part there, so I didn't hear what
I just wanted to say for all these people, and I shouldn't say women, okay? We'll say women, men, gay couples, all of us, every culture that just had to get into work every day and dress up and do the corporate thing, and they're exhausted. And all I want workplaces to do is go, give them a day at home now. Okay, guys, give them a day at home. And I see it now, and I'm so excited. Katie, you talked to that little seed. I mean, my goodness, if more people can work remotely, single moms and everybody, I just go, bring it on.
We've seen that it can work, so people can no longer say that it doesn't work. What were you going to say, Day?
Well, that's what's so funny, because so many businesses that said that they cannot allow their employees to stay home, they adapted. And it was a sink or swim type of thing, where if you don't, then your business stops. And then what do you do now? All those businesses that have figured out how to adapt are going to continue on and grow. So I think that's amazing. I mean, I'm not trying to be negative or positive. I sometimes feel like I can see a line drawn where there's people like True Soul, Kata, you guys, who are trying to help the community and everyone around them. And there's people who are, for myself. I'm just doing this for myself. Businesses that hike up prices for things that are so high that it's impossible to be affordable for some families. Or when you're thinking about the environment is so much cleaner now. You can feel it in the air. You can breathe it in. You go walk in the morning. And then you see all these dirty gloves all over and masks all over the ground. It's almost like sometimes you see the back and forth. And of course, we do what we can ourselves personally and hope that it grows. But I mean, sometimes I'm wondering, okay, so when we go back, are people going to be mindful of how clean our air is now and try to help? Now we see that it's possible, Because remember, a lot of people are saying it's not possible to go back from where we are. Now that we're seeing that it is possible, are people going to actively do things to help it keep going? Or is it going to go back to normal? And people
can never. It can never. It will never. And I don't use never all. I don't use those types of terms often. But it cannot go back to this way it was. One, because what we've seen, what we've experienced has planted seeds in people's minds. So as we move forward, we have an increase of the number of people who are conscious about the environment. We have an increase of people who are conscientious about, I really enjoyed spending time with my family. Like, I realized the importance of it again, because when we were rushing, hustling, it was like we could always put it off to the side as I'll get to that. Now it all of a sudden, everything stops and it's happening. People are not going to want to go back to that whole I'm just hustling, because they're loving the fact that they were able to sit at dinner. They're loving the peace that they found when they were in their home. So what's going to happen is it won't go back. We can maybe slide back a little bit, because there are people who, like, we have a mixture of everyone, right? Some people just don't want change. Some people welcome change. We got a whole mixture. We all are needed on this planet right now. But I know for a fact that we're not going back. And that's why it's so important to me that the people who are like you guys and people that you know that are similar, that you have this like juice, this stuff to share, that we collaborate. And I don't mean collaborate like I'm not doing a business pitch here. I'm literally saying, like, be aware, a heightened awareness, write things down that come to you, whether it's in sleep, before sleep, after sleep, in the middle of the day. Capture these things. These are nuggets that are being fed to you because you're shaped into a vessel of something that's to come. The people who are willing to do this type of work that we're doing right now are shaped in a way, we're shaped in a way for things to come, to help people bridge. And I want us to consciously do this. I know that we can do it. And if we stay connected, we can remember that when life kind of makes us forget. I really appreciate the fact that we had this conversation. And I know we're broadcasting.
It was awesome.
There are a few people that are still listening, and I appreciate the fact that you stuck around and got this juice.
Have a good night. Thank you for having us.
Have a fantastic
Thank
night.
you so much.
Thank you, Hannah.
It was
Thank
lovely.
you for making this beautiful community possible.
Thank you, Victoria. See you guys soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.